And what do you attribute that to?
I attribute that because they do not have a context through which to speak about that.
So it brings up fear.
Well, it brings up, I guess, fear, but more kind of almost an embarrassment, because we haven't, you know, we don't have a language to talk about that. We don't have a reference point to share what happened when we come back in. And often it's seen as this esoteric kind of metaphysical kind of thing that's kind of voodoo kind of, and it's our natural process. I mean, all of us are going to leave these bodies.
Yeah.
There's not one of us here that's going to be sticking in it for, I mean, maybe a couple thousand years. There's yogis in India who managed to do that, but most of us are going to be splitting in less than 100 years. And so it's like, you know, hey, let's talk about it.
And we don't know when it's going to happen. We figure 70 years, 80.
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And actually, just recently, you had another experience.
Yeah, that was the most profound experience. I have a, or what was termed a genetic heart disorder. And all the children in my family have this condition.
What's it called, by the way?
Oh, well, it's a form of arterial sclerosis, in a particular left anterior descending. And for some reason, ours is weak and gets clogged, and I made it the longest out of all of my siblings without having a major issue, and I made it till I was 41. And at 41, I suffered a full-on heart attack, and literally at that point, you know, was out of my body for more than 10 minutes. Had no oxygen. I experienced some brain damage as a result. I had 25% of my heart that was dead, that was no longer going to work again, and what have you. And so it was a pretty extraordinary experience, but I recovered from that, and I'm kind of a medical anomaly now as a result of that, because you don't normally see people recover from, you know, a brain that has been damaged and or a heart that's no longer going to pump. And in fact, I've successfully reversed all of the quote-unquote genetic disease. So
now the question that begs to be asked is, so how did that happen? What have you done? What's that about?
Well, during that process, and this is really the first time I'm talking about it in public, so this is a beautiful forum, so thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful.
You know, the 10 minutes that I was gone, when I came back, and after they had revived my body, and I was able to be aware of the whole process that was going on. I was watching the whole process of the reviving me and be driven in the, you know, the ambulance and all that
kind of stuff. Like sort of from above?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Actually, from almost any vantage point I wanted to. Sometimes from the eyes of one of the individuals who was treating me, sometimes from above the room. I actually could place my awareness anywhere I wanted. And it is very interesting. And, but the miracle that occurred in that experience was that doorway of being able to come in and out was left open for about 3 weeks.
Oh boy, wow.
And so at will, I could be here or not. And as a result of being able to come, you know, so as a result of being able to freely move like that, I began to be able to see what aspects of ourself are physical and what aspects of ourselves are not physical. And each time as I would come back in, and I would do it hundreds of times a day. I'm playing with this. This is like the ultimate playground. It's like in full bliss and come back, ooh, this sucks. Oh, I'm full bliss. Ooh, wow, boy, human. Ah, I'm full bliss. And literally coming back and forth and playing. And as a result, I was able to really see very clearly for the first time. I mean, I had glimpses of it when I came back with my other two experiences, but this time I was actually able to like slow down and stop at various planes and have a look at where we exist and where the interface is.
Almost like a pause button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where the interface, there is an interface between what our soul is and who we are, and then how our soul perceives this plane. And that interface is the human mind.
And that brings up the next question. So this book you call an owner's manual for the human mind.
That's correct.
So you were going to anyway, but I wanted to interject that. So elaborate on that a little bit. What does that mean, owner's manual for the human mind? And I know there's some terminologies you use in there like unplugged dog, dreams.
Yeah.
So,
well, the premise of the book,
yeah.
okay, is based on, in my search for trying to understand what was going on, I've read a lot of psychology, a lot of philosophy, a lot of religion, anyways. In my search for this information, I came across 3 independent, unrelated psychological experiments that took place in 3 different decades. So they had nothing to do with each other. They were just 3 independent research projects. They were studying something. And each one of those words, unplugged, dog, and dreams, represents one of each one of those 3 experiments. And when you put the findings of those experiments into a particular sequence, they create an undeniable, irrefutable way to view the human condition and why we are the way we are. And not only that, then what we can do about it. So there are certain mechanisms that are automatic, that are taking place in our mind.
Describe, I mean, you could, if you want to, go through all 3, but describe the dog one.
Okay.
That's one that was very profound. I mean, they're all profound, but
Yeah.
for some reason, that was very profound for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, out of context, I mean, in and of itself, it's a fascinating piece of research. So
Yeah.
researchers were...
Or you can put it in any context you want. I'm just...
Yeah. I'll just work with the one, though, because it would take too long, I think, really to
elaborate on
to
all
elaborate
3.
on all
People
3.
have to read the book for all 3, or go to your website.
Or go to the website. You can get all 3 for free at repeatlessness.com.
Okay.
And you can download the whole first chapter and premise for free.
Oh.
And so you just go
Fabulous.
to the free downloads area and click, first chapter, and bada bing, you can read it for free.
Right under Joe's name on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, scientists were experimenting with a dog, and they made a very large dog-sized maze, and they made a little screen on the floor where they could run an electrical charge through, and they were researching, stimuli and response. And so they put the dog in one side, they gave it a shock in its paws, and boom, the dog just hightailed it through the maze, made it all, put it back in front of the maze, shock its paws, it runs, shock, pause, shock, pause, shock, pause, stimuli, response. And so they proved to themselves that when you shock a dog's paw in one side, it's going to get the heck away from that area because it doesn't want to feel that shock anymore. Right. So then now this next part, it's really gruesome, and I by no means endorse this type of research, and animal lovers are not going to like what they did. Yet now that it's done, some 30 years later, we can learn from what they did. But they put a straitjacket on the dog, okay, and virtually made it impossible for the dog to move. Then they placed the dog back inside the maze. And they shocked the dog's paws, and it tried to move, but it couldn't. And they shock it again, tried to move, and they kept doing this. Finally, the dog gave up. It just gave up. And they'd shock its paws, and it would just stand there. It just didn't even try anymore. It knew it couldn't. And so after they had realized that the dog wasn't doing anything anymore, they then took the doggy, and they took the harness off, and they put it back in the maze, and they shocked its paws, and to their amazement, it just stood there. And they shocked it again. And it didn't even try to move. Here it was, completely free, completely unbound. It could do whatever it wanted. And every time they shocked it, it just stood there. And this came to be known as the learned helplessness phenomena.
So talk about how that interfaces with, again, I think you talk about it in the first chapter, how there's a disproportionate amount of self-defeating or negative thoughts that we have to positive thoughts, and that's how you tie this in, correct?
Along with the third, the first part of research is the repetitive thoughts that automatically happen in our brains. And just to give a quick synopsis, 95% of our thinking that happens, we are not aware of.
Unconscious.
We interact with 5%. Okay, and those of us who are actually pursuing our minds and actually meditate or work on thinking, what have you, are still only aware of around 5% of our thinking. So 95% of our thoughts are just on this automatic pilot.
Yeah.
And they've been able to prove that 80% of all of our thinking is negative or limiting in some way.
Or self-defeating. Or,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then creates a biochemistry that makes us feel yucky and all this other kind of stuff. So this is, I mean, I go into great detail and elaboration in exactly how they do that and what it's all about in the book. But so we have all these negative thoughts. And, can we unplug that thinking machine, can we turn it off? And it's then I say in the book, if they were to unplug it, they would unplug you, and that's the subject for a whole nother book, because thinking automatically happens, and it's not a matter of unplugging it and stopping it, it's a matter of unplugging from it